Welcome again to the Muscombe History Group channel, and we're now presenting the follow-up of the Battle of Jutland 1916. This is part 2 and it covers the daylight engagements. And the Battle of Jutland now becomes an exercise in missed opportunities. We left the story with Jellicoe on station with the Grand Fleet's dreadnoughts, but Beattie, having surprised Hipper's battle cruisers, turned south in pursuit. The German plan is to isolate the battle cruisers, and this could still be working. Even Beattie's run to the south is not without incident. His flag officer makes errors in signals that leave the 5th Battle Squadron to the north of Beattie's fleet, expecting a turn in that direction to join Jellicoe. The two fleets of battle cruisers sight each other at about 15:31. Hipper, on sighting Beattie, quickly makes a turn to the south, and Beattie follows him. Meantime, 5th Battle Squadron is to the north of Beattie's ships, ready to intercept, going north, which was the original plan. By 15:48, the 5th Battle Squadron is out of position by about 16 miles. At 15:40, Beattie's ships have a 17,000-yard range advantage, but they misread the ranges and fail to open fire. Instead, it's Hipper who fires first, and at 15:48 he opens fire at a range of about 15,000 yards. Beattie replies, but he overshoots with the sight set for 17,000 yards. It takes a while for the shooting to settle down. But when it does, at 16:06, Von der Tann fires a salvo, and HMS Indefatigable explodes and sinks. "20 minutes later, Derfflinger fires, and at 16:26, Queen Mary, one of the latest battle cruisers in the fleet, explodes and sinks. Beattie then sees von Scheer and signals his ships to turn north. But the 5th Battle Squadron is still out of position and is still about 6 or 7 miles behind the fleet. Hipper has succeeded in the first part of the German plan. But what's happening to the British ships? HMS Indefatigable takes 4 heavy shell hits. Then she is hit in Y turret, and the magazine for Y turret explodes and blows off the stern. At least 1,040 people are killed. There are only 2 survivors picked up. HMS Queen Mary takes 6 heavy shell hits, but she's one of the latest battle cruisers in the fleet and should be able to take this punishment. Then she is hit in B turret, and the magazine explodes and blows off the bow. At least 1,400 people are killed in HMS Queen Mary, and only 8 are picked up as survivors. Beattie now races to the north. 5th Battle Squadron retains position but suffers firing. Von Hipper gets his fleet of battlecruisers in hot pursuit and engages HMS Warspite at the back of 5th Battle Squadron, while von Scheer pursues with the heavies. What's actually happened to 5th Battle Squadron? When Beattie first spots the High Seas Fleet, he signals for his ships to turn north, but the 5th Battle Squadron is still some 16 miles behind and fail to see Beattie's signal. Beattie pours on the coals to get away, and he passes the 5th Battle Squadron, going in the opposite direction, and repeats the signal. As they pass in opposite directions, 5th Battle Squadron finally reads Beattie's signal. But Beattie's flag officer makes another signalling error by ordering Evan Thomas to rejoin the line, turning the 5th Battle Squadron in succession, which means that every ship in turn would sail to the same point before turning, rather than all turning away together. This would mean that 5th Battle Squadron will be under the guns of the enemy fleet almost as soon as the turn was attempted. Fortunately, HMS Warspite's captain decides that he will turn independently. But von Scheer gets into range and hits the tail end of 5th Battle Squadron, HMS Warspite, with 15 heavy shells during the run to the north in the battle. HMS Indefatigable and HMS Queen Mary each blow up after only 12 hits altogether. What's the difference for HMS Warspite? What's the difference for HMS Warspite? HMS Warspite takes 15 heavy hits and survives. But the 5th Battle Squadron is usually part of the Grand Fleet and is only on attachment to Beattie. And ammunition handling and safety precautions have been practiced and enforced in Scapa Flow. Jellicoe's ships practice safe live firing. Beattie's ships could not practice live firing in Rosyth, as the citizens of Edinburgh complained about their windows being broken with the blast. Nelson had won the Battle of Trafalgar because each of his ships could fire more cannonballs than the opposing enemy ship. The Royal Navy fleets in Nelson's time constantly practiced rate of fire and held to that maxim for more than 100 years. Fastest rate of fire wins the battle. Beattie sees himself as a new age Nelson. He emphasizes rate of fire to his captains, but does not necessarily spot the safety shortcuts that crews are taking to keep up the rate of fire. So let's take a quick caricatured look at a typical B turret, which was the one that exploded on Queen Mary and blew off her bows. The German armor-piercing shells worked better because hits burst inside the British turrets. British propellant cartridges are cordite cased in nitrated silk, where the Germans are using copper casing. Each shell, with its armor-piercing cap, is supposed to be timed to explode a split second after penetration, so that it explodes inside the armour protection. But British shells are inclined to explode on impact, so most of the energy goes to the outside. Each shell is driven by 2 propellant charges held in silk bags, and these silk bags are consumed on firing. Just above the bilges, right at the bottom of the ship, we find the charge magazine. Above that is the shell magazine, and for B turret we then have 2 shell handling floors, above which is the deck of the ship. Above the deck on a B turret is the gun room, and above that the gun turret itself. There is a charge shaft going from the charge magazine up to the gun room, which handles the charges on a lift, and the same for the shell shaft, which takes shells from the shell magazine directly up into the turret. It takes 2 charges to drive 1 shell. So, the cartridges are kept in the charge magazine, and shells are kept in the shell magazine, and also because of the difficulty in handling these heavyweight objects, some shells can be stored safely in the shell handling rooms. The idea is to then have 2 shells in the elevator going up to the turret, so that 2 shells are available as soon as the guns fire. 1 shell for each gun, and a similar arrangement to bring charges up from the charge room. But charges do not enter the gun room until the charges that are already there have been loaded onto the guns. So 4 charges going 2 to each gun before the next 4 charges are brought into the gun room. To improve rate of fire, the British left doors and hatches open and stored ammunition in the trunking. This has been proved by deep-sea archaeology of the wrecks involved. A German shell hits and penetrates into the turret. The shell explodes and knocks the turret out. About 100 men will have been killed at this stage. But because the trunking doors are left open, the flash goes down into the ship. And the magazine exploded. Resulting in a ship that in one case was completely broken in 2. A magazine explosion will literally blow the ship apart. And remember, we were looking at B turret, which is superimposed over A turret. The explosion in B turret would almost certainly have flashed across to A turret's magazine, which will also have exploded. HMS Lion, which is Beattie's flagship and a sister ship to Queen Mary, is also hit on Q turret, and 100 men were killed or critically wounded. And again, the flash went down the trunking and the charges in the magazine caught fire. The last command of Royal Marine Major Harvey before he died of his wounds, was to flood the magazine. This meant another 100 or so men were drowned, but the ship was saved. Harvey won a posthumous Victoria Cross. HMS Princess Royal, which was the third in class of these brand new battle cruisers, was steaming behind Beattie's flagship, HMS Lion. 3 salvos straddled the Princess in quick succession. The vast curtain of spray and smoke fooled a lookout on Beattie's flagship, who reported that she had also blown up. Whereupon Beattie made his famous remark, "There seems to be something wrong with our bloody ships today." And he added a rider which is not so well reported, "or our bloody systems." When he orders the turn to the north, Beattie and Jellicoe are separated by about 60 miles. Neither Beattie nor Jellicoe knows the whereabouts of the other. Both are sailing blindly in the general direction of each other. Beattie is racing north at full speed, hoping to stay out of the reach of von Scheer's big guns until he finds the Grand Fleet's dreadnoughts. But he is not signaling position, course, and speed to Jellicoe, nor is he giving Jellicoe any information concerning the enemy. At 1800, Beattie reaches Jellicoe's cruiser screen and signals enemy to the south-southwest, and this is flashed to Jellicoe. This is the first clear message to Jellicoe with position and course information. Admiral Hipper sees heavy units joining Beattie and circles to allow von Scheer to catch up. The heavy units are actually Admiral Hood with 3 battle cruisers, and he engages Hipper. Von Scheer regains his position at the rear of his battle cruisers. For some reason, Admiral Arbuthnot charges Hipper with Defence and Warrior, 2 old armoured cruisers. At 1820, Defence explodes for the sheer weight of fire that lands on it, and sinks, whilst Warrior limps away. At 1825, Lutzow engages Hood's 3 battle cruisers, and Invincible almost immediately explodes. HMS Invincible is a similar ship to HMS Indefatigable, and she is also the flagship of Rear Admiral Hood. She is hit by 4 heavy shells, but then a hit on Q turret blew up her magazine and broke her back, and she sank with only 6 survivors, and leaves behind this dreadful picture of a ship that has been broken in 2, and the stern and the bow are all that is left above the waves. However, HMS Invincible has also hit SMS Lutzen with a tight pattern of shells that will cause her to sink the following day. Continuing the merge, Jellicoe turns to port and forms his battle line. This is an inspired move. Any other action and he would miss the High Seas Fleet altogether. and that will probably mean that Beattie will be caught and destroyed by a superior force of the High Seas Fleet. At first, Beattie is masking the range for Jellicoe, but Beattie clears the range, and Hipper and Shear cut the corner to intercept. They then realise heavy units have joined Beattie, and at 1830 Jellicoe brilliantly crosses the enemy's T, a perfect setup for fleet action. A ship that is bow on to a target has a very narrow arc of fire for the lead ships only to fire their forward-facing guns. 4 or possibly 6 guns can fire directly ahead. On the other hand, the broadside to either side means that almost every ship can engage with between 8 and 10 gun broadsides from each ship. In fact, HMS Agincourt has 4 guns firing over her bow and 14 guns firing broadside. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. 7 twin gun turrets. Crossing the enemy's T prevents the Red Fleet from fully engaging the Blue Fleet. Only the front turrets of the lead ships can fully engage. Crossing the enemy's T allows all the Blue Fleet's guns to fire at the enemy. Blue Fleet's guns can all fire on the enemy and should destroy most of the enemy by superior firepower. Admiral von Scheer sees this danger and immediately orders the battle about turn to starboard. 22 ships turn together. Every ship in the German fleet turned 180 degrees away from the British, and they turned together. This maneuver clearly shows the superiority of signals and tactics held by the Germans. The Grand Fleet only makes this maneuver at squadron strength. 4 or a maximum of 6 ships turning together. Jellicoe pounds the enemy for 20 minutes, and at 1900-ish, von Scheer realizes the danger and orders the battle turn to starboard. And now the entire German High Seas Fleet is steaming away. But at 1920, von Scheer reverses his fleet again and sails back towards Jellicoe's Grand Fleet. Why does von Scheer turn again? It's likely he could not believe the Grand Fleet was across his bows. Jellicoe should still be in harbour. He now also has his slowest pre-dreadnoughts leading his fleet. He has to re-establish his battle line and test the enemy's strength, and that requires a second battle about turn. Grand Admiral von Scheer reverses his fleet and sails northeast with Hipper leading. Von Hipper now sees gun flashes across the entire horizon. They have given Jellicoe another opportunity to destroy the German high seas fleet. Jellicoe is now pounding the battlecruisers, and Beattie angles towards the enemy so that he can join in. At 1940, von Scheer reacts and turns away from Jellicoe again. This time, von Scheer sends Hipper forward on the Ride of Death to cover the High Seas Fleet's withdrawal, so this turn is much more ragged. Von Scheer departs west-southwest, and Hipper runs onto Jellicoe and Beattie's combined broadsides. Hipper is now suffering concentrated fire from the entire Grand Fleet. To provide some cover for Hipper's battlecruisers, von Scheer now orders an all-out torpedo attack by his destroyers. This is an accidental masterstroke. At about 2000 hours, the Grand Fleet sees a torpedo attack developing. And Jellicoe has a standing order to deal with mass torpedo attacks called combing the tracks. A fleet sailing at right angles to a torpedo attack is exceedingly vulnerable. Several ships are likely to be hit. Combing the tracks means that the fleet turns into the torpedo track and the torpedoes go through the gaps. But turning into torpedoes also shortens the range for any follow-up attack of some type. So, Jellicoe's standing orders require that the fleet turn away together. Combing the tracks by turning away firstly gives ships more time to avoid oncoming torpedoes, and they might actually outrun the torpedoes as they run out of fuel. But turning away also puts the enemy out of range of a counter-thrust from those being attacked. In accord to Jellicoe's standing orders, the Grand Fleet turns away and, although it would not be apparent for a few more hours, the greatest battleship fleet confrontation in history was almost over. Von Scheer could not have known that throwing his destroyers would end the risk in what for him was an almost suicidal battle. As soon as he is clear of fire, von Scheer turns to the south. Jellicoe turns away from the torpedo attack, and when the torpedo attack is delivered, the destroyer flotillas gather, retreat, and follow von Scheer to protect the High Seas Fleet. As soon as Jellicoe turns away, Hipper turns away with his battered battle cruisers and again retreats to the south. Jellicoe recovers his line, runs south, then turns west in an effort to make contact with the High Seas Fleet, realizes that it's getting late, and then turns south again. and calls on Beattie to take up scouting stations. And night falls. It is general knowledge throughout the fleet that the Germans are better at night fighting. A simple ruse bears this out. At night, when Royal Navy ships meet, they flash a 2-letter code of the day word, which is intended to change each day. German standing orders require German ships when meeting Royal Naval ships to clumsily flash 2 letters at random. This usually allows the German ships to pass unhindered. German light signals and searchlight gunnery allows the Germans to maintain fleet coherence at night. The Germans understood that night fighting might even up the odds against the Royal Navy, so they had fleet tactics for night fighting. The Royal Navy did not even have reliable ship recognition signals at night. The Royal Navy would prefer to avoid any night action, and did not wish to engage even when the enemy was in sight. So Jellicoe and Beattie plan to wait for dawn. Jellicoe's standing fleet orders to turn away from a torpedo attack on one side, and the exigencies of combat with superior forces that the Germans have met on the other side, have meant that all ships on each side have been steaming away from each other for some time, and are now steaming generally to the south. They are some distance apart, but are free to maneuver with some independence. The battle should continue tomorrow, but who knows where and when the fleets will meet. Jellicoe and Beattie are trying to intercept, and von Scheer and Hipper are trying to get back to the safety of their ports. So, the Battle of Jutland may already be over. Let's see what happens in part 3, the night actions and the aftermath. Hopefully, we'll see you there.